March 1st, 2025, 7 a.m. A Venezuelan warship sails within 700 meters of an American oil platform, producing over 200,000 barrels daily. Over the radio, "You are operating in Venezuelan waters, but the warship is deep inside territory Guyana has controlled since 1899. To understand what's really happening, I went through the original 1899 arbitration records, 15 volumes of British diplomatic cables and interviews with Indigenous leaders whose families have lived in this territory for generations. Here's what the documents actually show about Venezuela's claim to 2/3 of Guyana. 26 days after that warship confrontation, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio lands in Georgetown. At the joint press conference with Guyana's president, Rubio stares into the camera. It would be a very bad day for the Venezuelan regime if they were to attack Guyana or ExxonMobil. We have a big navy. It would not end well for them. Within hours, Maduro fires back. There goes the imbecile Marco Rubio, threatening Venezuela from Guyana. No one threatens Venezuela because this is the homeland of the liberators. That confrontation made global headlines, but let me tell you who actually lives in the territory they're fighting over. 125,000 people, 90% of them indigenous. Jean Larose is a Lokono woman who won the Goldman Environmental Prize in 2002 for coordinating Guyana's first indigenous land rights lawsuit. In April 2024, she wrote, "We do not recognize borders. We recognize the river that gets us to one place. We recognize the mountain we must cross to get to one place." Lloyd Pereira is the Toshao, that's the chief, of Wakapoa village on the Pomeroon River. When Venezuela held a referendum claiming his home, he told Al Jazeera, "Even as a small boy, I remember hearing Venezuela saying, 'Essequibo is theirs.' But I also know I live in Essequibo. And as an indigenous person, Essequibo is ours." Derek John, chairman of the National Toshaos Council, explained the stakes at COP28. "If Venezuela should have its way, then we will lose everything we have achieved. We have fought for and we have protected for centuries." Here's the thing, 126 years ago, when European powers decided who owned their land, not a single indigenous person had a say in that decision. On October 3rd, 1899, an arbitration tribunal meets in Paris. 5 men, 2 British jurists, 2 American judges representing Venezuela, and 1 Russian jurist decide who controls 159,000 square kilometers of territory. The proceedings last 55 days. Not one indigenous person is in that room. The tribunal issues its ruling, what's called the award. Britain gets roughly 90% of the disputed territory. Venezuela gets the mouth of the Orinoco River. Now watch what Venezuela does next. For 63 years, they don't just accept this ruling, they actively implement it. From 1900 to 1904, a joint commission walks the entire boundary and plants markers. On January 10th, 1905, both sides sign an agreement confirming the coordinates. In 1931, they build a monument at Mount Roraima, where 3 borders meet. In 1941, Venezuela's foreign minister calls the frontier well-defined and a closed issue. Then, suddenly, on February 14th, 1962, Venezuela tells the UN there's a dispute. What changed? British Guyana is about to become independent, and Venezuela has just read a posthumous memorandum from one of their own 1899 lawyers claiming fraud. But that 1962 rejection is nothing compared to what happens in 2015. May 20th, 2015, ExxonMobil announces the Liza 1 discovery offshore Guyana. Initial estimates suggest 700 million barrels. Later discoveries reveal 11 billion barrels. 7 days later, literally 7 days, on May 27, 2015, Venezuela publishes a decree claiming sovereignty 200 miles into Guyana's waters and authorizing the Venezuelan Navy to secure this area. The documentary record shows us exactly where Venezuela's position changes, and it changes the week ExxonMobil strikes oil. By 2024, Guyana is producing over 650,000 barrels daily. The economy has tripled. ExxonMobil has committed over 60 billion to offshore projects. 5 days after the December 2023 referendum, Maduro orders Venezuela's state oil company to immediately grant operating licenses for the exploration and exploitation of oil, gas and mines in Essequibo. Not study it, immediately exploit it. Now, Venezuela teaches every school child that the 1899 arbitration was a fraud. The story. The American judges were coerced by the Russian president, who secretly met with British arbitrators. Venezuela was robbed. This comes from that memorandum, written 45 years after the tribunal and published posthumously in 1949. The author, Mallet-Prevost, claims the Russian jurists offered the Americans a choice: accept a unanimous ruling or face an even worse decision. But when you look at the actual documents, the story falls apart. In 1950, American legal scholar Clifton Child examined 15 volumes of British Foreign Office papers, every single document from those years, the tribunal proceedings and British newspaper coverage. His conclusion: not a single document indicates a secret deal. Zero evidence. More damaging, Justice Brewer himself praised the British arbitrators on July 23, 1899, during the proceedings. He said he had great admiration for the impartial and strict sense of justice shown by the British arbitrators. That's not how coerced judges talk. The questions are obvious. Why wait 45 years? Why publish only after death? Why never protest publicly? Now let me tell you about Venezuela's claim to protect indigenous peoples in Essequibo. About 2,500 indigenous Warao people have fled from Venezuela to Guyana as refugees. There's also violence. In January 2018, a young indigenous Guyanese miner was tortured by a Venezuelan gang. They cut off his ears, beheaded him, and posted the video online. In March 2025, Venezuela claimed they'd held community assemblies in Essequibo. The National Toshaos Council called these claims completely false and confirmed no such community assemblies took place. Venezuela has never consulted the indigenous peoples who actually live there. Meanwhile, here's what's happening to those communities right now. Parabara is a village of about 200 YY and Makushi people. A 2017 study found 100% of participants had elevated mercury levels, averaging more than 10 times the WHO safe limit. The mercury comes from gold mining operations upstream. Mining camps have more than doubled since 2024. Fish is the main protein source. The community knows about the contamination, but what choice do they have? This is happening under Guyana's administration, and Venezuelan control offers no promise of improvement. Venezuela's state oil company has one of the worst environmental records in Latin America. On February 17, 2025, 6 Guyanese soldiers were shot in an ambush by Venezuelan gang members. On May 25, 2025, Venezuela held elections for a territory it doesn't control, defying an International Court of Justice order. The ICJ ruled 12-4 in Guyana's favor in 2020, then 14-1 in 2023. The final judgment is expected in 2026. The 1899 arbitration excluded indigenous peoples entirely. In 2025, they're still excluded from decisions about their own land, except now there's 11 billion barrels of oil in the balance. Lloyd Pereira, the Toshao of Wakapoa village, said it simply: I am Guyanese. Essequibo is my home. It belongs to Guyana. I will die here. History isn't destiny, but oil apparently can make you rewrite it.